As we mark, of course, a milestone here, the 23rd anniversary of the handover, you see this wealth gap quite remarkable when you have the highest concentration of billionaires here in the city. And then on the other side, you have 1 in 5 people that still live below the poverty line. What do you think is the source of this disparity?
I think a number. First, technological change in the world over. Globalization has resulted in a stagnant middle income class for 3 decades or more, creating a rising gap. And this is particularly accelerated in Hong Kong because of mainland China's opening up that has generated a hyper acceleration of this process in Hong Kong over the past 3 decades.
Yeah, you mentioned China's opening. Also, mainlanders driving up housing prices. This is an economy that is very reliant on mainland money now. You mentioned it exacerbated the inequality issues. Do you see that changing in any way, especially now that we see that there's political unrest in the city?
Well, I don't think it will stop, but because in part the mainland's influence is not just money coming in the past 40 years. There have been huge influxes of low-skill new immigrants that through cross-border marriages between mainland and Chinese and Hong Kong Chinese residents. As a result, that gap has also widened in terms of human capital distribution. Although it has alleviated labor shortages, however, it has also widened the income gap. And worse thing that is because the property prices have been rising, creating a huge wealth gap at the same time. This means that not only inequality in incomes, but inequality in asset ownership, particularly home ownership, and this prevents upward mobility. So the left to itself, this process is not going to abate.
Professor, the question of housing in Hong Kong is one that legislators there, lawmakers there have said they're going to address and pledged to address for a number of years. Why have they failed to do that, and what exactly do they need to do? What steps do they need to take to address the question of housing?
Well, first of all, like most metropolitan areas, land development, housing supply is a heavily regulated industry. But the demand for housing in Hong Kong has grown so rapidly that the regulatory restrictions actually slow down development compared to the rising demand. And as a result, this has accepted price increases. Now, changing regulatory structures needs a building of consensus. It needs political willpower, and this is a bit lacking for the past 2 or 3 decades to address these issues, largely because the changes have grown so rapidly that political consensus cannot be easily rebuilt in a short period of time. There are solutions. Half the population in Hong Kong live in government-provided housing, mostly as renters. So privatizing the public housing stock by selling it to the sitting tenant provides the fastest solution that government should implement, and that will address a considerable part of the wealth inequality that has plagued the city for the past 2 to 3 decades. And then you have to privatize it by selling the
We had a similar policy in the UK with... I was going to say we had a similar policy in the UK with Maggie Thatcher and Right to Buy, and the problem was you did get a new middle class, but then it used up all the housing stock. What are the other policy prescriptions that you would like to see enacted in Hong Kong?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Thatcher solution sold the stock, but did not continue to provide public housing because it was council housing very much in the hands of local political processes. In Hong Kong, if we were to privatize the public housing stock, government would continue to have to participate in increasing the supply of public housing stock for sale to eligible buyers. I think that is the simplest. The other thing is basically to relax and ease the regulatory restrictions to development. Very long, cumbersome processes have delayed development, prevented redevelopment. This is a common phenomenon in many major urban centers. So deregulation of restrictions that slow down development.